Hello everyone, so in this lecture video I am going to be talking about metabolism. Specifically I'm going to be talking about the catabolic process of making ATP. The reason why the catabolic process of making ATP is very important is because the ATP that's created at the end of this catabolic process called cell respiration is going to be the energy required to supply energy for anabolic processes. And I hope that you read through your slides and learn about what anabolic and catabolic processes are. So this is ATP. This is the structure of adenosine triphosphate. The reason why it's called triphosphate is if you count P's, there are 3 of them, right? If there were only 2, it will be called ADP, adenosine diphosphate. If there's only 1 of them, it's called AMP, adenosine monophosphate, right? Now, why is this so important for us, for living systems? The reason why this is very important, folks, is because if you look at this, clustered in this region, the red region, are 3 phosphate groups. If you look further closely, you can see that there are negative charges, right? So there is a big negative charge on this triphosphate group. Now, particles of similar charges do not like being close to each other, okay? 2 negative particles do not like being close to each other. 2 positive particles do not like being close to each other. So there is a lot of potential energy. This last phosphate is just wanting to snap off because it cannot stand the fact that it's right next to not just 1, but 2 negatively charged phosphate particles. So what happens is when this last phosphate group breaks apart, there is a huge release of energy. I shouldn't say huge, but there's a release of energy, okay? And so that release of energy, there's extra energy at the end of this breakdown. That extra piece of energy is what drives a lot of cell processes. So I'm gonna do a diagram here to show you how ATP works. So let's say, for instance, so here's a mountain, and this is a very classical, and here's a person, okay? And this is actually ATP. I'm sorry, again, this is a cursor drawing, so this is terrible. So it's going downhill. This is called an exergonic process. It's releasing energy, right? There's another person who wishes to go up this mountain. Now, going down a mountain yields energy. Going up the mountain requires energy. Well, this is ATP. The breakdown of ATP creates energy, and anabolic processes require energy. So what happens, folks, is you couple them, you connect them together so that when ATP releases energy, that powers other processes that require energy. So if you go down the hill, you pull someone up. So that is the whole reason why ATP is so important. So this is called energy coupling, okay? Now, how do you make ATP? Holy cow, here we go. So for our purposes, I am going to talk about, in this case, the classical pathway of cell respiration, which involves glucose. FY glucose is C6H12O6. Okay? And you probably, please recall the structure from your chemistry portion. So it has 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. Folks, the most important element here is hydrogen. Okay? So all this is, folks, is as glucose enters this pathway, and FYI, this pink area is in the cytoplasm. This is anaerobic, meaning to say it does not require oxygen. Glucose, folks, in glycolysis, it's 6 carbons, right? Is split into 2 pyruvate molecules, and each pyruvate molecule has 3 carbons. Okay? So you went from 6 carbon into 2 moieties that each one has 3 carbons. Now, in the process of splitting them apart, what happens, folks, is you lose pieces of hydrogen. You lose hydrogen atoms. Those hydrogen atoms, folks, is taken up by this molecule called NAD. So NAD without a hydrogen, without carrying hydrogen, is called just NAD. When it starts carrying hydrogen, it's called NADH. It's a highly complicated molecule. Okay, we're not going to talk about the whole name of it. All right. So NAD takes up excess hydrogen created from the splitting into two pyruvate molecules. That process, by the way, is called glycolysis. Again, it happens in the cytoplasm, and it doesn't require oxygen. So this is anaerobic. No oxygen. An means without, aerobic means oxygen. Okay. So then this 3 pyruvate molecules then enters the Krebs cycle, and FYI, what's omitted here, folks, is there's another step, and what happens is actually each one of them becomes C2. Okay, and actually this is probably what's being shown here. This, folks, are connected to a big enzyme is called acetyl coenzyme A. Okay, AC. Okay, I'm just gonna mess this up. Acetyl coenzyme A. All right, I'm sorry again. Okay, now what happens is, if you can see, each one of them lost a carbon. Guess where that carbon went? It becomes carbon dioxide, shown here. Okay, then these 2 carbons then join with a 4 carbon substance. The little enzymes and the little substances is not important for you. And what happens, it goes through a cycle, folks, and all it is you are basically taking away hydrogens from glucose. This hydrogens then gets caught by NAD and by another molecule called FAD. FYI, these carriers of hydrogen are called coenzymes. Okay, and these are vitamin B based molecules. All right. ATP, folks, a very, very small amount of ATP gets created from glycolysis and from the Krebs cycle, or sometimes called the tricarboxylic acid cycle. 2 plus 2, that's, you only get 4 ATP. Oops. 4 ATP. Okay. The bulk of your ATP gets created, folks, in this thing, okay, called the electron transport chain, or electron transport phosphorylation, which happens inside the mitochondria. So everything in blue is in the mitochondria, and everything in blue requires oxygen. So this is aerobic. Okay. I can't write, and this is a terrible cursor writing. It's just the worst thing ever. Okay. And why? How does all of NADs and FADs and all these extra hydrogens create ATP? Folks, I don't know if you guys, has anyone ever heard of a dam? So a dam is is where there's more water on one side, all right? And what happens is water flows from an area of greater concentration to lower concentration. It turns a turbine, all right? And that's actually how you make, all right? And that power from the water from dam going from an area of higher concentration to lower concentration is how you make electricity. Well, folks, in the electron transport chain, it's actually not water but hydrogen that's stored on one side of the dam. And as hydrogen flows from an area of higher concentration to lower concentration, it turns a turbine called an ATP synthase, and it smashes ADP, adenosine diphosphate, with a phosphate molecule, with an inorganic phosphate molecule, and guess what you get? ADP, two phosphates plus another phosphate, you get ATP, adenosine triphosphate, 3-phosphate molecule. Okay? Now here's the thing. Oxygen, folks, is actually the reason why you need oxygen at the end is by accident. I shouldn't say by accident, by evolutionary accident. Okay? If you recall from chemistry, hydrogen ions creates a highly acidic environment. And highly acidic environments is actually not good for you. Okay? You can actually cook yourself from the inside out if your internal environment is actually high in hydrogen ions. Okay? So the way that you neutralize this, folks, is if you add oxygen to this. Guess what you get when you add oxygen to a hydrogen atom? You get Water. Okay? And folks, the bulk of your ATP production, just by looking at this 32 ATPs, comes from electron transport chain or electron transport phosphorylation. Okay? And again, the way this occurs is based on hydrogens getting cleaved off glucose and being transported to this dam, the electron transport chain, by NAD and FAD. Okay? No oxygen, anaerobic in the cytoplasm, aerobic with oxygen inside the mitochondria. Now, who thought that was as simple as that? It's not. Okay? So we talk about glycolysis in this case, if you want to look at this one from the basis, from the perspective of glucose molecules. But you need to remember from the chemistry lecture that all four macromolecules, whether they're proteins, lipids, nucleic acids, consist of carbon cytoskeleton. Proteins are composed of amino acids. The typical amino acid is made up of 2 carbons. All right, glycerol is made up of 3 carbons. Fatty acids, again, are made up of odd-numbered, in this case, even-numbered carbons. So 18 is one example. 18, 16, 22, you name it, okay? Folks, we can also use proteins and lipids and even nucleic acids to make ATP. The only problem with amino acids is, in the amino acids, you actually have this toxic group called ammonia. So the first thing that you have to do in order for you to use protein, folks, is you have to remove the ammonia in a process called transamination. So you remove the toxic ammonia, and now you can use the 2 carbon to make acetyl coenzyme A. And again, acetyl coenzyme, folks, is a 2 carbon moiety, and pyruvate is a 3 carbon moiety. Glucose obviously is a 6 carbon moiety. And the glycerol, on the other hand, folks, since it's a 3 carbon moiety, enters the pathway through the pyruvate because that's where the 3 carbons are enter. Now, fatty acids like this, for this example, 18 fatty acids, you cannot plug in all 18 into the mitochondria. There's actually a step-by-step process in which you actually chop this up 2 at a time. 16, then 14. You guys get the idea here, 12. Okay, and what happens is you take pieces of 2 carbons through a process called beta oxidation. And then beta oxidation, because the product is a 2 carbon chain, enters the acetyl coenzyme A process. And again, guess who carries those hydrogens around? Hydrogens gets carried by NAD and FAD, and the bulk of ATP is still created from the electron transport chain. This red blobs are from the electron transport chain. Okay? Now, the human body prefers glucose as the energy source. But as we know, if you are starving, your body will eat itself inside out. So then the number 2 source of fuel is lipids. The number 3 source of fuel is proteins. Okay? If you start to break down nucleic acids in your body, you're in deep trouble. Okay? You might as well, kiss your butt goodbye because you're going bye-bye soon. Okay? So it's the same thing as glycolysis before, and in this case, the tricarboxylic acid cycle or the citric acid cycle or the Krebs cycle. But again, note that proteins and lipids enter the metabolic pathway in different portions. So the catabolic pathway that we were talking about before, in which we actually take pieces of hydrogen and actually create ATP from it, cannot be made possible without the presence of an enzyme. So the whole metabolic pathway is full of enzymes. There are actually 10 steps of glycolysis and 8 steps of the Krebs cycle. All of them, folks, are, in this case, catalyzed by enzymes. And enzymes, folks, are proteins that actually speed up chemical reactions by putting 2 things close to each other. 2 things that react close to each other. Okay? So without the presence of enzymes, folks, the creation of ATP, in fact, all of the chemical processes in the body, metabolic processes, cannot occur. Okay, so again, just know that whole metabolic pathway is, in this case, uses enzyme.